The Arab millionaire comes home 3 hours early and finds the cleaning lady in his private office. She turns around, looks him in the eyes and whispers, "Shut up, don't say anything." What is she hiding that could destroy this powerful man? Tell us, where are you watching from? Drop a like and subscribe, because what's coming, you'll never expect it. When the train slowed entering Napa Station, Emily Mitchell felt the weight of memories press against her chest like an invisible hand. It had been a decade since she'd sworn never to return. Yet here she was, with a worn suitcase and a crumpled letter bearing the seal of the Al-Mansour family. Sometimes fate brings us back to the very places we've tried to escape, as if to teach us that no distance is great enough to separate us from what truly matters. The California sky shone with a blue almost painful to the eyes, while the July heat enveloped the town in a suffocating embrace. Through the smudged window, the familiar contours of the Napa Valley hillsides stood against the horizon like a mirage from her past. Emily, 35, with chestnut hair pulled back in a messy bun and green eyes marked by a decade of sleepless nights in New York, gathered her belongings with measured movements. Attorney Wilson's letter was clear. Grandmother Eleanor had died, leaving her the old estate in the Napa Valley hills and a request she couldn't ignore. "You can't run forever, my dear." Her grandmother's last words, relayed in the letter, echoed in her mind as she stepped off the train. The aroma of ripening grapes and fresh-baked sourdough invaded her nostrils, awakening memories she had tried to bury beneath years of distance and silence. On the crowded platform, a tall man with dark hair slightly graying at the temples held a sign with her name, Tariq Al-Mansour, the last person she wanted to see and, ironically, the first she encountered upon returning home. The son of her father's former business partner, the man who had inherited the Al-Mansour wine empire while the Mitchell family lost everything, the man who had broken her heart. "Emily," he said, his voice deeper than she remembered. "Welcome home." "This isn't my home anymore, Tariq," she replied, deliberately avoiding his gaze. "I'm only here to honor my grandmother's last wishes and sell the estate. Nothing more." A sad smile crossed Tariq's face. "Things aren't always as they seem, Emily. Perhaps it's time you discovered that." As they climbed into the vintage Range Rover, the same one he'd driven 10 years earlier, Emily felt an unsettling sensation, as if each mile toward the Napa Valley hills was a step back in time, toward secrets she would have preferred to leave buried, toward a truth that could change everything. The Mitchell estate appeared suddenly after a curve, imposing against the California sky. Once a symbol of wealth and prestige, it now showed signs of neglect: peeling paint, faded shutters, the once meticulously tended garden now wild and untamed. Yet there was still beauty in its decay, like a modernist painting marked by time, but no less precious. "Did Grandmother Eleanor live here alone all these years?" asked Emily as Tariq parked in front of the main entrance. "No," he replied, turning off the engine. "She lived in the cottage near the vineyard. She closed up the main house after what happened. She said big houses need laughter and children, not old women with too many regrets." Emily felt a pang in her heart. She had been the one to leave her grandmother, convinced that the Al-Mansour family had orchestrated her father's financial ruin, driving him to despair and suicide. A conviction fueled by her grandmother's own silence, who had never denied nor confirmed her suspicions. Attorney Wilson awaited them on the entrance steps, a small man with thick glasses and a folder clutched to his chest. "Miss Mitchell, it's a pleasure to see you again. Your grandmother spoke of you often." "Not enough to tell me the truth, I imagine," she murmured, shaking his hand. The interior of the estate was exactly as she remembered, and yet completely different. The furniture was covered with white sheets, like immobile ghosts waiting for the return of the living. Light filtered through the closed shutters, creating golden beams that illuminated the dust dancing in the still air. "Your grandmother left very specific instructions," Wilson explained, opening the folder. "The estate is yours, but there's a condition." Emily raised an eyebrow. "What condition?" "You must stay here for 3 months before you can sell. And during that time you must catalogue the contents of the family library and restore the small vineyard behind the house." "That's ridiculous," exclaimed Emily. "I have a life in New York, a job, responsibilities. I can't just—" "You can take a leave of absence," Tariq interjected, his intense gaze fixed on her. "The art school where you teach is closed for the summer, right?" The fact that he knew so much about her life irritated her deeply. That's not the point. Why would Grandma impose something like this on me? The attorney cleared his throat. Mrs. Eleanor also left this for you. He extracted a sealed envelope from the folder. She asked that you read it alone. Later, in her childhood bedroom, Emily opened her grandmother's letter with trembling hands. The elegant, slanted handwriting filled the yellowed paper. My dear Emily, if you are reading these words, it means I have finally found peace. But you, my dear granddaughter, have not yet found yours. You fled Napa carrying only half of the truth with you, and that half has poisoned your soul for too long. I ask you to stay in our home for 3 months, not as punishment, but for redemption. The library contains all the answers you seek. Your father's journals are hidden where only you can find them. And the vineyard, that small plot your father loved more than anything, needs your hands to be reborn just as you need this land to heal. Tariq al-Mansour is not the enemy you believe him to be. The truth is complicated, Emily, and forgiveness is a gift we give first to ourselves. With eternal love, Grandma Eleanor. Emily let the letter fall onto the bed, her heart pounding furiously. Journals? What truth was her grandmother hiding, and why involve Tariq in all of this? The sunset painted the room orange when she heard a gentle knock at the door. Tariq stood in the hallway, holding a basket covered with a cloth. I thought you might be hungry, he said, and that we might need this. He lifted the cloth, revealing a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, the last vintage your father and mine produced together. For a moment, Emily was tempted to slam the door in his face. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability she had never noticed before that made her hesitate. 1 glass, she finally conceded. And then you'll explain exactly what's going on here. The next morning, Emily awoke to birdsong and the aroma of fresh coffee. For a disorienting moment, she believed she had returned to adolescence and that her grandmother was waiting for her in the kitchen with breakfast ready. Reality hit her like a punch to the stomach. She was alone in this big house, with only memories to keep her company. The previous evening, Tariq had left after 1 glass of wine, promising to return with tools to begin restoring the vineyard. He hadn't answered her questions, merely saying, "Some truths need to be discovered, not told." After a quick shower, Emily headed to the library. It had always been her refuge as a child, a world of adventures contained between leather covers and yellowed pages. The large circular room occupied the entire west wing of the estate, with shelves extending from floor to ceiling and a spiral staircase that allowed access to the highest books. The door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a room unchanged by time. Dust danced in sunbeams filtering through tall, arched windows. The large brass globe beside the mahogany desk, the worn velvet sofas, the scent of paper and leather. Everything exactly as she remembered. Libraries are like people, her father always said. They hold secrets in plain sight, waiting only for the right reader to reveal them. But where to begin? Her grandmother had spoken of journals hidden where only she could find them. Looking at the vast collection of books, Emily felt overwhelmed. It would take months to examine each volume. She approached her father's desk, running her fingers over the polished wood. She remembered sitting on his lap as he read, his deep voice bringing fantastic worlds to life. How could she believe that this man, so full of life and passion, had chosen to abandon her? A noise at the window made her start. Tariq stood in the garden, a toolbox in hand, and his gaze directed toward her. He nodded, as if to say he was waiting for her outside. "I don't have time to play farmer," Emily muttered, but headed for the door anyway. Perhaps working under the sun would help clear her thoughts. The small vineyard behind the estate was in worse condition than she had imagined. The rows of vines, once orderly and lush, had grown wildly, intertwining in an almost impenetrable tangle. The tool shed was half destroyed, the roof partially collapsed. "Your father always said this plot had the best exposure in all of Napa Valley," said Tariq, handing her a pair of gardening gloves. "The soil here has something special. It produced few bottles, but of exceptional quality." Emily took the gloves reluctantly. "Why do you care so much about this place? Your family has much larger and more profitable vineyards." Tariq knelt, examining a particularly tangled vine. "This place isn't about profit, Emily. It's about passion. Your father understood that, and your grandmother too. They worked side by side for hours, cutting dry branches, untangling vines, clearing the ground of weeds. The July sun beat down mercilessly, but there was something cathartic about the physical work, feeling the earth under her hands, the smell of soil and vegetation. "Why did you come back to Napa?" Emily asked suddenly. "The last time I saw you, you were in Boston, ready to conquer the financial world." Tariq stopped, wiping his forehead with his forearm. "Sometimes we return to our roots to remember who we truly are. Boston was wrong for me. Too cold, too far from everything that really matters." "And what would that be, in your opinion?" "The land, family, authenticity." He paused, looking at her intensely. "The people we love." Emily looked away, feeling her cheeks flush, not just from the heat. "I'll get some water," she said abruptly, heading toward the house. In the kitchen, as she filled a water pitcher, she noticed a loose tile near the pantry. Driven by curiosity, she knelt and lifted it, revealing a small cavity in the floor. Inside, a rusty metal box. With her heart beating fast, she removed it and opened it. Inside was a single object, an old key with a yellowed label that read simply, "For when you are ready to know." The key weighed in Emily's pocket like a tangible secret. She hadn't shown it to Tariq, instinctively hiding it when she heard him enter the kitchen. Something told her this was a private message, from her father to her across time and silence. The afternoon slipped away between work in the vineyard and fruitless attempts to catalogue the first shelves of the library. As evening fell, Tariq left, promising to return the next day. Left alone, Emily took out the key again, examining it carefully under the library lamp. It was an antique key, wrought iron, with elaborate decorations on the handle. Intertwined vine leaves, she noticed with surprise. It must open something special, not just a simple door or drawer. "Think, Emily," she told herself. "Where would Dad hide something important? Where only I could find it?" Her gaze wandered the library, finally settling on the large brass globe. It had always been her favorite object as a child. She spent hours spinning it, dreaming of exotic places and adventures. One day, her father surprised her, and instead of scolding her for touching such a precious object, sat beside her. "See, my little one," he had said, "the world is full of treasures, but the most precious are those we carry within us." With a sudden flash of intuition, Emily approached the globe. Examining it carefully, she noticed a small slit in the base, almost invisible to the naked eye. With trembling hands, she inserted the key. It fit perfectly. A soft click, and half the globe opened like a Fabergé egg, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, a small leather-bound book, with her father's initials embossed in gold. T.M. Thomas Mitchell. Emily picked it up reverently, caressing the soft cover. She settled into an armchair near the window, where the moonlight was strong enough to read, and opened the first page. May 12, 2010. Today, Karim Al-Mansour proposed merging our companies. It's an extraordinary opportunity, but also risky. The Al-Mansours have capital we can only dream of, but our land, our vines are special. Eleanor is worried, says business and friendship should never mix. But Karim and I have been friends for a lifetime. We trust each other. And besides, this could secure a solid future for my Emily. Emily turned the page, her heart beating fast. In the following weeks, the journals described the initial enthusiasm for the partnership, the ambitious plans, the first bottles produced together. Then gradually the tone changed. September 3, 2010. Something's wrong. The accounts don't add up. Karim insists it's normal in an expansion phase, but I feel he's hiding something from me. Eleanor says I should trust my instincts. But how can I doubt my best friend? October 17, 2010. Today I discovered the truth. It wasn't Karim betraying me, but his son, young Tariq. He made risky investments without my knowledge, using the company name. We lost millions. Karim is as devastated as I am. He offered to personally cover the losses, but how could I accept? Mitchell pride can't be bought. Emily paused, her breath short. Tariq Al-Mansour, the man who had broken her heart, was also responsible for her father's financial ruin. She continued reading, her hands trembling more and more. December 23, 2010. It's over. The banks denied the credit extension. We'll have to sell everything. except the family estate and the small vineyard registered directly in Eleanor's name. My beloved wife Sarah died 5 years ago, and now I'm losing the company we built together. How can I look my daughter in the eyes and tell her I failed? The last page was dated February 14th, 2011, the day before her father's suicide. I've made a decision. Karim offered once more to save the company, to buy back my shares at a generous price. But I can't live with this sense of failure. My life insurance policy will cover the remaining debts, and Emily and Eleanor will have enough to live with dignity. Karim promised to look after them, but I know my mother. Her pride is as strong as mine. Emily, if you ever read these words, know that I loved you more than life itself, and that my last thought was of you. Tears flowed freely down Emily's face. For 10 years she had blamed the Al-Mansour family, believing they had deliberately ruined her father. But the truth was more complicated. Karim had tried to help, not destroy. And his son, had he really been guilty, or just young and inexperienced? A noise at the door made her start. Tariq, the son, the man now at the center of this painful enigma, stood on the threshold, his face filled with concern. "I knew you'd be here," he said softly. "I saw the light from the road." "You knew?" asked Emily, raising the journal. "You knew about this?" Tariq shook his head, approaching cautiously. "Not about the specific journals, but I knew there were truths your grandmother wanted you to discover on your own." "My father killed himself because of you," said Emily, her voice breaking with pain and anger. "Because of your reckless investments. How can you show up here as if nothing happened?" Tariq lowered his gaze. "It's not that simple, Emily. Yes, I made mistakes. I was young, arrogant, convinced I could beat the market. But I'm not solely responsible for what happened." "What do you mean?" "Your father already had financial problems before our partnership. He didn't want you to know, but the company had been sinking in debt for years. My father tried to save him, not ruin him." Emily rose suddenly. "Liar! My father was an honorable man, a respected vintner." "Yes, he was respected. But after your mother's death, he began taking risks, making hazardous investments to try to rapidly expand the company. He wanted to leave you an empire, not a small family business." The words hit Emily like slaps. "I don't believe you. There are documents, Emily, balance sheets, contracts, loans. Your grandmother knows everything, always did. Why do you think she never accused my family?" Doubt insinuated itself into Emily's mind. Was it possible? Her father, the man she adored, had hidden such an important part of his life? "If that's true," she finally said, "why didn't you tell me 10 years ago?" Tariq sighed deeply. "Because you were devastated by grief. Because you needed an enemy to pour your anger onto. And because," Emily hesitated, "because I loved you too much to hurt you even more." The silence that followed was heavy as a lead blanket. Outside, the night sky over Napa Valley sparkled with stars, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding beneath it. "Leave," Emily finally said, her voice a whisper. "I need to think." When the door closed behind Tariq, Emily pressed the journal to her chest and let the tears flow freely, feeling for the first time in 10 years as if she were finally crying, not just for her father, but also for herself and for all the lost time. The following days passed in an emotional limbo for Emily. She immersed herself completely in work, dividing her time between cataloguing the library and restoring the vineyard. Tariq hadn't returned, but he had sent 2 experienced young workers to help her with the vines, a gesture that had both irritated and relieved her. One morning, while organizing some old books on enology, she found a photo album hidden between 2 heavy volumes. The photographs showed her father and Karim Al-Mansour at different moments in their lives. As young men harvesting grapes together, as young men toasting at Thomas's wedding to Emily's mother, to more recent images, shortly before the tragedy. In each photo, a genuine friendship shone. Emily paused at one particular photograph. Her father, Karim, and young Tariq, all smiling in front of a large oak barrel. Engraved on the barrel was Harmony 2010, the last vintage produced together. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Mrs. Johnson, the woman from the nearby town who came to clean the house twice a week. "Miss Emily, Mr. Wilson wishes to speak with you," she announced with her strong California accent. The attorney was waiting in the living room, impeccable in his grey suit despite the heat. "Miss Mitchell, I apologize for the intrusion," he said, rising when she entered. "But there's an urgent matter that requires your attention." "What is it?" asked Emily, noticing the folder the man was nervously holding. "It's about the vineyard. There are legal complications." He pulled out some documents. "According to these records, the small vineyard behind the house isn't entirely your family's property. Half of it legally belongs to the Almansors." "What? Impossible. My father would never—" "It was part of an agreement made shortly before his death," Wilson explained, showing her a contract with Thomas Mitchell's signature. "Your father needed liquidity and sold half the vineyard to Karim Al-Mansour with a buyback clause that was never exercised." Emily felt betrayed once again. "And Grandma knew?" "Yes, miss. Mrs. Eleanor was aware of everything. In fact, she was the one who suggested this solution, to keep at least part of the property in the family. And now? Does Tariq want to claim his half?" Wilson seemed uncomfortable. "Actually, no. Mr. Al-Mansour contacted me this morning to say he intends to cede his share of the vineyard to you, without compensation." Emily stared at him incredulously. "Why would he do that?" "He didn't provide explanations, miss. He just said it's the right thing to do." After the attorney's departure, Emily made an impulsive decision. She grabbed the keys to her grandmother's old Jeep and headed to the Al-Mansour property, a large estate about 20 miles from the Mitchell estate. The property was exactly as she remembered, imposing, elegant, with acres of perfectly tended vineyards stretching as far as the eye could see. The main house, a Spanish colonial with a honey-colored stone facade, seemed to gleam under the California sun. At reception, a young secretary greeted her with a professional smile. "I'm sorry, miss, but Mr. Al-Mansour isn't available today. If you'd like to leave a message—" "Where is he?" insisted Emily. "It's important." The secretary hesitated. "He's in the experimental vineyard, but he gave orders not to be disturbed." "Thank you," said Emily, already heading toward the back door. She knew the property well. She had spent many summers there during adolescence, when her family and the Al-Mansours were still united by a friendship as solid as the Napa Valley hills. She found Tariq in a small isolated plot, kneeling between the rows, carefully examining the leaves of a vine. He wore worn jeans and a white linen shirt with rolled-up sleeves, very different from the impeccable businessman who presented himself in public. "Why are you doing this?" asked Emily without preamble. Tariq rose slowly, not seeming surprised to see her. "Good morning to you too, Emily. Don't play with me. Why do you want to give me your share of the vineyard?" "Because it never truly belonged to me," he answered simply. "My father bought it only to help yours. We would never have used that land. So it's pity? A charitable gesture toward the poor orphaned Mitchell?" Tariq shook his head, a shadow of frustration crossing his face. "After all this time, you still don't understand. This isn't about pity, Emily. It's about doing the right thing, about correcting the mistakes of the past." "Your mistakes, you mean?" "Our mistakes, all of us. Your father who risked too much, me who invested badly, my father who wasn't transparent enough, your grandmother who kept secrets to protect you." He paused, looking at her intensely. "And you, who ran instead of facing the truth." The words hit her like a slap. "How dare you?" "I dare because someone needs to," exclaimed Tariq, his patience finally giving way. "It's been 10 years, Emily. 10 years of silences, half-truths, resentment. Don't you think that's enough?" They stared at each other for a long moment, the tension palpable in the hot July air. Then, unexpectedly, Tariq took her hand. "Come with me. There's something you need to see." He led her through the property to a small stone building that served as a private cellar. Inside, among oak barrels and dusty bottles, there was an entire wall dedicated to bottles with labels Emily immediately recognized: Harmony, the line created by the collaboration between her father and Karim Al-Mansour. "We've kept every bottle we produced together," explained Tariq, gently caressing one of the labels. "My father never wanted to sell them after what happened. He said they weren't simply bottles of wine, but liquid memories of a friendship." Emily felt her throat tighten. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to understand that not everything was lost, that there's still beauty in the things our families created together." He turned to her. "And because I have an idea that could honor your father's memory and give us both a new beginning." In the golden light of the Californian sunset, Tariq outlined his proposal as they walked between the rows of vines. His plan was audacious, almost reckless: renew the partnership between the Mitchell and Al-Mansour families, but in a new, more equitable way. Use the small vineyard behind the house as experimental ground to create a special, limited wine that would combine the traditions of both families. "We could call it reconciliation," he suggested, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "A unique blend produced in limited quantities, not for profit, but to celebrate the bond between our families, to honor the memory of your father and mine." Emily listened with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "It's a beautiful idea, Tariq, but I'm not an enologist. I know nothing about viticulture or winemaking." "Your father taught you more than you realize," he replied with a gentle smile. "I've seen you with those vines. You have his hands, his instinct, and besides, I'm here. I can guide you if you'll let me." The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In that light, Tariq's face seemed younger, more vulnerable, taking Emily back to the times when they were just two young people exploring the cellars together, dreaming of the future. "I don't know if I can trust you," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "I understand," he replied, surprising her with his frankness. "I'm not asking you to trust immediately. I'm asking you to try. 3 months, Emily, the time your grandmother asked you to stay. Let's see what we can create together." On the way back to the Mitchell estate, Emily remained silent, absorbing everything she had seen and heard. Tariq had accompanied her to the old jeep, but didn't get into the car with her, respecting her need for space. The estate was silent when she returned, wrapped in the shadow of twilight. She turned on the lights, but the house still seemed empty, echoing with absences. Her father, her grandmother, all the ifs and buts that had defined her life for a decade. That night, Emily had a vivid dream. She was in the vineyard, but not the current one, uncultivated and abandoned. It was lush, full of life, with heavy grape clusters gleaming in the sun. Her father was there, younger than she had ever seen him, with hands dirty from soil and a serene smile on his face. "Sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what truly matters," he told her in the dream. "Sometimes we need to return to our roots to grow again." She woke at dawn with a decision already formed in her heart. She called Tariq early, surprising him. "I accept," she said simply, "but I have conditions." "Anything," he replied, his voice husky from sleep. "I want to see all the documents relating to the agreement between my father and yours. I want the complete truth. No more partial versions. Done. And I want 51% of this new project. If you truly want reconciliation, it must begin with a rebalancing of power." There was a pause, then Tariq laughed lightly. "You truly are your father's daughter, Emily Mitchell. All right, 51%. And one more thing," she added. "No secrets between us. Never again." The seriousness in her voice must have communicated how important this was, because Tariq's response was equally solemn. "I promise." In the days that followed, Emily and Tariq worked side by side in the vineyard. It was hard work under the relentless July sun, but strangely fulfilling. Emily discovered muscles she didn't know she had, and an instinctive knowledge of the vines that she must have absorbed during childhood, watching her father. Tariq proved to be a patient teacher, explaining pruning techniques, how to recognize plant diseases, how to evaluate soil quality. He didn't treat her as a beginner, but as a partner, respecting her intelligence and her ability to learn quickly. One evening, as they rested in the shade of an oak tree after a long day's work, Tariq pulled a bottle of wine from his bag. "Look what I found in my father's cellars," he said, showing her the label. "First Dream, 1997. It was the first wine Thomas Mitchell had produced as an independent vintner, the year Emily was born. Dad said he had set aside some bottles for my wedding," murmured Emily, caressing the yellowed label. "I know, my father kept this one for you." Tariq looked at her with an intensity that made her blush. "I thought this moment was as special as a wedding. The rebirth of your father's vineyard, our new beginning." They opened the bottle with almost religious reverence. The wine, despite its age, was extraordinary, rich, complex, with notes of dark fruits, tobacco, and a long finish that spoke of the Californian land from which it came. "It's incredible," whispered Emily with tears in her eyes. "It's as if Dad were here with us." "In a way he is," replied Tariq, looking at the ruby liquid in his glass. "In this wine, in the land, in you." They looked at each other for a long time, the silence laden with unspoken meanings. Then Tariq leaned in slowly, hesitantly, and brushed her lips with his. A gentle kiss, a question more than a statement. Emily pulled back slightly, her heart beating fast. "Tariq, I'm not sure I'm ready for this." "I understand," he replied without insisting. "We have time, Emily. All the time we need." But that night, alone in her bed in the big silent house, Emily found herself touching her lips, recalling the kiss, and wondering if, perhaps, after 10 years of anger and pain, it was finally time to allow herself to feel something different. The next morning brought a change in the air, not just metaphorical but literal. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising the first summer storm. Emily awoke feeling strange, as if the previous evening's kiss had opened something inside her that had remained sealed for too long. Tariq arrived later than usual, bringing a folder full of documents, the contracts and agreements he had promised to show her. His behavior was formal, professional, as if he too was trying to regain balance after their shared moment of intimacy. Seated at the large kitchen table, with cups of strong coffee and the windows darkening with the arrival of rain, they examined their family's past together. The documents confirmed what Tariq had told her. Her father had begun making risky investments after Emily's mother's death, accumulating debts he had hidden from everyone. "He was a proud man," explained Tariq, indicating a particularly onerous loan. "He didn't want anyone to know how much he was struggling. Not even my father, who was his best friend." "And then you came along with your wrong investments to make everything worse," said Emily, unable to completely contain the bitterness in her voice. Tariq sighed. "Yes, I was young, arrogant, fresh out of business school and convinced I could conquer the world. I made decisions without properly consulting either my father or yours." He hesitated, then added, "But the truth, Emily, is that the company was already compromised. My mistakes only accelerated the inevitable." Thunder roared in the distance, followed soon after by rain drumming on the roof. The storm had arrived. "Why did my father choose to—" Emily couldn't complete the sentence, the word suicide still too painful to pronounce. Tariq looked at her with sad eyes. "I believe he felt trapped, between pride and despair, between the shame of failure and love for you. He did what he thought was best." "Abandoning me wasn't the best," exclaimed Emily, hitting the table with the palm of her hand. 10 years of repressed anger finally found an outlet. How could he think that leaving me alone was the solution? How could he be so selfish? Tariq didn't respond immediately, letting the emotional storm pass through her, just as the natural one raged outside. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "I don't think it was a selfish decision, Emily. I think in his mind, distorted by pain and despair, he thought he was doing you a favor. The life insurance paid the debts, ensured that you and your grandmother had a home, education, a future. He sacrificed himself for you." "I never asked him to sacrifice himself," cried Emily, tears finally flowing freely. "I only asked him to be my father, to stay." Tariq rose and embraced her, holding her tight as she sobbed against his chest. It was the first time she had truly cried for her father's death, not with anger, not with resentment, but with the pure pain of loss. Outside, the storm raged, a perfect reflection of the emotional turmoil within her. She didn't know how long they remained like that, embraced in the old kitchen while rain beat against the windows. When they finally separated, she felt tired but strangely light, as if a weight she had carried for years had been lifted. "I'm sorry," she murmured, wiping her eyes. "I don't know what came over me." "Never apologize for your feelings, Emily," he replied, gently caressing her cheek. "They're real. They're yours. They're sacred." Those simple words touched her deeply. For years, she had repressed any emotion that wasn't anger or resentment, building high walls around her heart. Now those walls were beginning to crumble, and the sensation was terrifying and liberating at the same time. When the rain finally ceased, they went out together to check on the vineyard. The air was fresh and clean, the earth moist and fragrant. The vines seemed greener and more vigorous after the rain, as if nature itself was celebrating a new beginning. "Do you know what's amazing about vines?" said Tariq, gently running his fingers over a wet leaf. They suffer, struggle, are drastically pruned, and yet they continue to grow. And the more they suffer, the deeper their roots become and the better the wine they produce. Emily looked at him, understanding the parallel. Are you saying pain makes us better? I'm saying pain is part of life, not a mistake. It's how we face it that defines who we become. He took her hand, squeezing it in his. You survived, Emily. You grew despite everything. Just like these vines. That night, after Tariq left, Emily returned to the library and picked up her father's journal again. She reread it from beginning to end, but this time with new eyes, not seeking culprits or confirmations of her anger, but trying to understand the complex man her father had been, with his fears, his dreams, his mistakes. On the last page, she found something she hadn't noticed before. Her phrase written in a different ink, as if added later. Sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes it takes forgiveness, from others and from oneself, to truly heal. Emily closed her eyes, letting those words penetrate her heart. She had spent 10 years clinging to pain and anger, refusing to forgive, her father for abandoning her, Tariq for his mistakes, herself for not seeing the signs, for not doing enough. But perhaps it was time to try a different path. Perhaps forgiveness wasn't a weakness, but the greatest strength of all. With this new awareness, Emily fell asleep in the library armchair, her father's journal clutched to her chest, and, for the first time in 10 years, a sense of peace beginning to make its way into her stormy heart. August brought an oppressive heat that enveloped the Napa Valley hills like a heavy blanket. Work in the vineyard became increasingly demanding, but Emily discovered she enjoyed the physical challenge, the way her muscles burned at the end of a long day, the deep sleep that followed. The weeks passed in a reassuring rhythm, mornings in the vineyard with Tariq, afternoons dedicated to cataloguing the library, quiet evenings on the terrace with a glass of wine and conversations that gradually became more personal, more intimate. Tariq told her about the years after the tragedy, how he had immersed himself in work to escape the sense of guilt, how he had tried to make the family business not only profitable but ethically responsible. He spoke of his dreams to modernize production methods without losing respect for tradition, to expand the market for high-quality American wines abroad. Emily, in turn, told him about her life in New York, teaching art history at a small private school, the tiny apartment in Brooklyn, the superficial friendships she had never allowed to deepen for fear of being hurt again. She told him about her studies, the exhibitions she had curated, the artistic projects abandoned halfway. I never painted the portrait I wanted to make of my father, she confessed one evening, as the sun set behind the hills. I have sketches, drafts, but every time I try to complete it, I freeze. Perhaps because you hadn't yet made peace with him, Tariq gently suggested, with his memory, with what happened. And now? Asked Emily, looking at him intensely. Now you're here. You're facing the past instead of running from it. That's already a huge step forward. That night, inspired by the conversation, Emily dusted off the old canvases and paints she had left at the estate years before. She set up an easel in the library, next to the window overlooking the vineyard, and began painting by the light of an old lamp. It wasn't her father's portrait, she wasn't ready for that yet, but the landscape of the vineyard at sunset, with the long shadows of the vines on the reddish soil, and the sky changing from gold to purple to indigo. She painted until dawn, lost in the creative flow she hadn't experienced in years. When she finally stopped, exhausted but satisfied, she realized she had created not just an image of the vineyard, but a visual declaration of her gradual return to life. The next morning, when Tariq arrived, she showed him the painting with unusual shyness. "It's magnificent, Emily," he said, genuinely impressed. "You've captured the soul of this place." "Thank you," she murmured, blushing slightly under his admiring gaze. "I haven't painted so intensely in years." "You should do it more often. You have a gift." They went out together for the usual session of work in the vineyard. The heat was particularly intense that day, the sun relentless in a cloudless sky. Despite starting early, by noon both were drenched in sweat and tired. "Maybe we should take a break," suggested Tariq, seeing Emily stagger slightly as she lifted a heavy basket of weeds. "It's too hot to continue." "I'm fine," she insisted. "I want to finish this row before stopping." Tariq shook his head with an exasperated smile. Always stubborn, just like your father. Emily was about to respond, when suddenly the world began to spin around her. She saw Tariq's worried face, heard his voice calling her name, then only darkness. She woke in her bedroom with a damp cloth on her forehead, and Tariq seated beside her, his expression tense with worry. "What happened?" she asked weakly. "Heat stroke," he replied, relieved to see her conscious. "You pushed yourself too hard, as usual." Emily tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in her head forced her back onto the pillows. "The vineyard. The vineyard can wait. You need to rest." Tariq took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You scared me, Emily." Something in his tone, in the vulnerability of his gaze, touched her deeply. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully see the man he had become. Not the one she remembered, or the one she had blamed for years. A man with his flaws and his scars, certainly, but also with a depth and gentleness she had not wanted to recognize. "I'm sorry I scared you," she murmured, returning the squeeze of his hand. "And I'm sorry for many things." Tariq shook his head. "This isn't the time for apologies. It's time to heal. To rest." He stayed with her for the rest of the day, bringing her iced tea and books, checking her temperature, telling her stories of his childhood on the Al Mansour estate to distract her. It was only when the fever dropped and Emily slipped into a peaceful sleep that he allowed himself to leave, promising to return the next day. The following day, Emily felt better but still weak. Tariq, true to his word, returned early, bringing with him a basket of fresh fruit and unexpected news. "I've spoken with some experts from UC Davis's Department of Viticulture and Enology," he announced, sitting on the edge of the bed. "They would like to come see the vineyard. There's something special about those vines, Emily, something rare." "What do you mean?" "The soil, the exposure, the variety of grape. It's a unique combination. If we can fully restore the vineyard, we could produce a truly exceptional wine, a wine that could bring back the Mitchell name among the great Napa Valley producers." Emily stared at him, surprised by the enthusiasm in his voice. "Do you really believe that's possible?" "I don't just believe it, I'm certain, but—" He hesitated. "There's a problem. Complete restoration will require more time and resources than we had anticipated. And you said you wanted to sell the estate and return to New York in October." The implicit question hung between them, heavy as a ripe cluster on the vine. What would Emily choose? Return to her safe but lonely life in New York, or risk staying, building something new from the ashes of the past? For the first time since she had returned, the prospect of leaving no longer seemed like liberation, but loss. The idea of leaving the vineyard in the midst of its restoration, of abandoning the project that had begun to give new life to her dormant heart, caused a dull ache in her chest. And there was Tariq, who had become, what exactly? A friend, a partner, something more that she didn't yet dare to name. "I need time to think," she finally said, avoiding his gaze. "Of course," he replied, rising. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." Those simple words, "I'll be here," hit her with unexpected force. It was exactly what she had longed to hear from her father, what life had so cruelly denied her. The promise of presence, of constancy, of someone who wouldn't disappear. After Tariq left, Emily remained awake for a long time, staring at the old ceiling with its dark wooden beams. She felt she was at a crossroads, not just regarding the vineyard or the estate, but her own life. The choices she would make in the coming days would define not only her future, but also how she would relate to her past. As twilight enveloped the room in violet shadows, a thought crossed her mind. Perhaps true freedom wasn't in flight, but in having the courage to stay, to face, to rebuild. Perhaps it was time to stop being a visitor in her own life and begin to put down roots, exactly like the vines that were slowly coming back to life under her care. The following days saw Emily convalescing, forced to reduce physical work in the vineyard, but more active than ever in cataloguing the library. This forced limitation proved to be a blessing in disguise, allowing her to discover hidden treasures among the dusty volumes. Ancient enology treatises, handwritten by her great-grandfather, family diaries dating back generations, even a collection of love letters exchanged between Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa William during the Korean War. On a rainy morning, while examining an old photo album, she found an image that took her breath away. She and Tariq as teenagers, perhaps 15 or 16, sitting on the vineyard wall, their heads close together, as he showed her something in a book. Did she remember that moment? She wasn't sure. There had been so many similar summer afternoons, before everything changed, before the adult world with its complications and betrayals intruded on the simplicity of their friendship. "We were inseparable," said a voice behind her, making her start. Tariq had entered silently, his hair damp from the rain. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." The door was open. Emily closed the album, suddenly uncomfortable, as if she had been caught in a moment of vulnerability. "What were you doing here that day?" she asked, indicating the photograph. Tariq approached, a nostalgic smile softening his face. "I was showing you a book about the French Impressionists. I had found it in San Francisco and knew you would like it. You were obsessed with Monet that summer." The memory suddenly returned. The golden light of late afternoon, the smell of earth and ripe grapes, the excitement of seeing those colored reproductions of water lilies and gardens, the way Tariq's fingers occasionally brushed hers as they turned the pages. "You gave me that book as a gift," she murmured. "I took it with me to New York." His gaze lit up. "Really? You kept it all this time?" Emily nodded, feeling strangely vulnerable. "It was the only link I allowed myself to maintain with this place." They looked at each other for a long time, the silence laden with unspoken meanings, unexplored possibilities. Outside, rain beat against the window panes, creating a melancholy soundtrack to their encounter. "Why are you here today?" Emily finally asked, breaking the spell. Tariq seemed to compose himself. "I have news. The enologist from UC Davis will come tomorrow to see the vineyard if the weather permits. And there's more." He hesitated, as if weighing whether to share. "I spoke with a gallery owner in San Francisco, a friend. I showed him a photo of your vineyard painting." Emily raised her eyebrows, surprised. "You did what?" "He's enthusiastic, Emily. He wants to see more of your work. He's organizing an exhibition of emerging California artists in the fall, and—" "I'm not an emerging California artist," she interrupted him abruptly. "I'm an art history teacher in New York, and I didn't give you permission to show my work to anyone." Tariq seemed caught off guard by her reaction. "I'm sorry, I thought you'd be happy. Your talent deserves to be seen, Emily." "That's not the point," she exclaimed, standing up. "It's about you making decisions for me, once again. Like you always do." "What do you mean?" "I mean you act as if you know what's best for me, for the vineyard, for everything. Just like 10 years ago, when you decided that investing the company's money in those risky projects was a good idea, without consulting anyone." As soon as the words left her mouth, Emily knew she had crossed a line. Tariq's face hardened, his eyes darkening with pain. "I thought we had moved past this phase," he said quietly. "But I see some ghosts are hard to exorcise. Tariq, No, you're right, I shouldn't have taken initiatives without consulting you." His tone was formal, distant. "I apologize. I'll tell the gallery owner you're not interested." He turned to leave, but Emily stopped him, grabbing his arm. "Wait. I'm the one who should apologize. I overreacted." Tariq stopped, but didn't turn to look at her. "Why, Emily? Why is it that every time we take a step forward, something pushes you to take 3 steps back?" The question hit her deeply, forcing her to confront a truth she had avoided for too long. "Because I'm afraid," she finally admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I'm afraid to trust, to bind myself to this place, to you. I'm afraid to stay and then lose everything again." Tariq turned slowly, his eyes softening. "Fear is understandable, Emily. But you can't let it prevent you from living." "I know," she sighed. "Rationally I know, but then something happens, like you taking an initiative without telling me, and all the old fears resurface." "And if I promised you it won't happen again?" he asked, moving closer. "If I promised you that every decision, every step we'll make together from now on?" Emily looked into his eyes, searching for signs of deceit, manipulation, but found only sincerity. "I wish I could believe you. Then give me a chance to prove it, day by day." He took her hands in his. "I'm not asking for promises, Emily, just possibilities." In that moment, looking at their intertwined hands, hers small and pale, his large and tanned from outdoor work, Emily understood that the real conflict wasn't between her and Tariq, but within herself. Between the part that wanted to protect her wounded heart and the part that desperately wanted to risk again, to feel again, to live again. "All right," she finally said. possibilities. That night, alone in the big house, Emily rethought the conversation and everything that had happened in the last few weeks. She realized that slowly and almost imperceptibly, something was changing inside her. The walls she had built around her heart were beginning to crumble, allowing new emotions, fear, yes, but also hope, curiosity, even joy, to filter through the cracks. She took the old photo album and leafed through it again, this time allowing herself to fully immerse in the memories, family parties, harvests, lunches in the shade of oak trees. How much happiness there had been before the pain, how much life before the loss. She paused at one particular photograph, herself as a child, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, sitting on her father's shoulders as he walked between the rows of vines. Both were laughing, their faces illuminated by a pure and simple joy. "What would you think of me now, Dad?" she whispered to the photograph. "Would you be proud of my choices? Would you understand my fears?" There were no answers, only the silence of the big house and the steady beating of her heart. But somehow, looking at that moment crystallized in time, Emily felt a certainty grow within her. Her father wouldn't have wanted her to live in the shadow of his death, clinging to pain and anger like an anchor. He would have wanted her to flourish, to risk, to love. With that awareness, Emily made a decision. She would give a chance not only to Tariq, but also to herself. She would allow the past to be past, and the future to be something new, not defined by old wounds but by new hopes. That thought brought with it a strange peace, as if a weight she had carried for years had finally been lifted from her shoulders. When she fell asleep that night, for the first time since she had returned, she didn't dream of the past, but of the future. A future full of lush vineyards, vibrant art, and, perhaps, love. The visit from UC Davis's enologist, Professor Martinez, a small man with thick glasses and contagious enthusiasm, brought an unexpected turn of events. After carefully examining the vineyard, taking soil samples and inspecting the vines with the precision of a surgeon, he delivered his verdict with eyes shining with excitement. "What you have here," he announced as the three sat in the shade of the porch, "is an extremely rare clone of Cabernet Sauvignon. We call it Teardrop of the Sun, and it was considered extinct for decades." Emily and Tariq exchanged a surprised look. "How is that possible?" asked Tariq. "This vineyard has always been here in plain sight." The professor smiled, cleaning his glasses with a handkerchief. "Sometimes the most precious treasures are right under our noses. This clone produces smaller clusters, but incredibly concentrated ones. The wine obtained from it is exceptional, rich, complex, with extraordinary longevity." He turned directly to Emily. "Your grandmother guarded a priceless heritage without even knowing it." That evening, after the enologist's departure, Emily and Tariq celebrated the discovery with a bottle of Napa Valley wine, sitting on the terrace as the sunset tinged the sky orange and purple. "It's incredible," said Emily, her face illuminated with excitement. "Dad knew, don't you think? He knew how special this vineyard was." Tariq nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Probably yes. Your father had an unerring instinct for land and vines. That's why he wanted to keep this plot separate from the rest of the company, to protect it from—" He broke off abruptly. "From your reckless financial decisions?" Emily completed, but without the usual acidity. It was more an observation than an accusation. Tariq looked at her, surprised by the lack of rancor in her tone. "Yes, I suppose so." He paused. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have confessed a long time ago." Emily's heart accelerated. "What is it?" Tariq took a deep breath. "The night before your father, before he made that terrible decision, I went to him. I wanted to take responsibility for my mistakes, tell him I would do anything to make amends. But it was late. The house was dark. I saw a light in the library and approached the window." Emily stiffened, feeling she was about to hear something painful. "Your father was at his desk writing. He was crying, Emily. I had never seen him cry before." Tariq's voice broke. "I should have gone in, talked to him. Maybe I could have stopped him, but I was a coward. I was afraid of his judgment, his disappointment. So I left, promising myself I would return the next day." He lowered his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. But the next day was too late. The silence that followed was heavy as a lead blanket. Emily stared at her glass, the red wine capturing the last rays of the sun like drops of blood. For 10 years I've carried this weight, continued Tariq. The thought that perhaps if I had had more courage, things would have been different. Emily finally raised her gaze, her eyes bright but dry. You can't know that, she said softly. No one can. My father had made his decision. She paused. And perhaps it's time for both of us to stop torturing ourselves with what-ifs and maybes. Tariq looked at her with amazement, as if he couldn't believe her response. I expected you to hate me even more. It would be easier, wouldn't it? She replied with a sad smile. To hate you, to blame you, that's what I did for 10 years, and it was comfortable in a way. Anger is simpler than pain. She shook her head. But I don't want to live like that anymore, Tariq. I don't want to be a prisoner of the past anymore. Her words seemed to freeze something inside him. What do you want, Emily? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The question hung in the air between them, laden with possibilities and promises. Emily looked at the vineyard stretching below them, the vines slowly coming back to life thanks to their shared care. She looked at the house, which from a mausoleum of painful memories was gradually transforming back into a home. And finally she looked at the man seated across from her, with his mistakes and his scars, his kindness and patience. I want to live, she said simply. I want to create. I want to feel. Everything, not just pain. I want to discover if this place can be my home again, if we can truly transform something broken into something beautiful. Tariq extended his hand across the table, a silent offer. Emily took it, intertwining her fingers with his. And I want to find out what's between us, she added, with a vulnerability that would have terrified her just a few weeks before. If there's a future, beyond the past we share. Tariq's smile spread slowly, lighting up his entire face. I want that too, he replied. More than you can imagine. He leaned across the table, and this time, when his lips met hers, Emily didn't pull away. The kiss was sweet, tender, a seal to an unspoken promise, a bridge between the painful past and a future yet to be written. When they separated, night had completely fallen, enveloping the terrace in a mantle of stars. A light breeze carried the scent of jasmine and moist earth, and somewhere in the distance a mockingbird began to sing. What do we do now? Whispered Emily, suddenly aware of being in unknown territory, without a map to guide her. Tariq squeezed her hand. One step at a time, he replied. Like with the vineyard, we can't rush the process. But if we have patience, if we nurture it with care and respect, something beautiful will grow. In those simple words, Emily found unexpected comfort. One step at a time, not grand promises or absolute certainties, but small daily steps toward a shared future. Perhaps that was all that was needed, all that was possible in the complicated garden of human life. That night, as Tariq returned to the Al Mansour property, Emily remained for a long time on the terrace, contemplating the stars and feeling for the first time in 10 years that the possibility of happiness wasn't an unreachable mirage, but something she could cultivate with her own hands, just like the precious vines in her vineyard. September arrived with a sweetness in the air, an attenuation of the brutal August heat and the first signs of impending autumn. It was harvest time throughout Napa Valley. Not in the small Mitchell vineyard, still too young to produce, but in the vast plots of the Al Mansours and other surrounding estates. Tariq invited Emily to participate in the harvest at the family property, a festive occasion that brought together workers, friends and family in a ritual as old as civilization itself. For Emily, it was a dive into childhood memories, the smell of freshly harvested grapes, hands stained with purple juice, the laughter and folk songs that accompanied the work, the outdoor lunch beneath century-old oak trees. But this time, there was a fundamental difference. She was no longer a child observing from the margin, nor a stranger looking on with detachment. She was an integral part of the community, her hands in the earth and her heart open to the human connections she had avoided for so long. Karim al-Mansour, Tariq's father, was present at the harvest, an elderly but still vigorous man, with the same penetrating eyes as his son and a dignity that the years had only accentuated. When he saw Emily, his eyes lit up with surprise, and she believed she saw hope. Emily Mitchell, he said, taking both her hands in his. How much time has passed? You've become the image of your mother. Mr. Al-Mansour, she replied, surprised by the warmth in his voice. It's a pleasure to see you again. Tariq has told me about the vineyard. About the rare clone. He smiled, slightly shaking his head. Thomas would be so proud. He always maintained that small plot had something special. No one believed him at the time. Not even you? Asked Emily, unable to contain the question. The elderly man sighed. I'm afraid I was too focused on the big numbers, on industrial production. Thomas was a poet of the land. He saw things that I, with my businessman's mentality, couldn't comprehend. He paused, looking at her intensely. Not a day goes by that I don't regret not having listened to him more. Perhaps if I had, things would have been different. Those sincere words touched Emily deeply. For the first time, she clearly saw that she wasn't the only one who had carried the weight of remorse and regret for all these years. Karim al-Mansour, too, behind his facade of self-assured patriarch, had his scars, his what-ifs that tormented him in sleepless nights. We cannot change the past, Mr. al-Mansour, she said gently, but perhaps we can build something new from its ashes. The elderly man nodded, his eyes moist. That's exactly what I hope, my dear. Exactly what I hope. During the harvest lunch, seated beside Tariq beneath a pergola of vines heavy with ripe grapes, Emily observed the large extended al-Mansour family, not just blood relatives but also workers who had served the estate for generations, friends, neighbors, all united by the common bond with the land and its traditions. This is what I missed in New York, she confessed in a low voice to Tariq. This sense of belonging, of continuity. He smiled at her, intertwining his fingers with hers under the table. It can be yours again if you want. This land, this community, this life. The unspoken offer in his words was clear, and for a moment, Emily felt the familiar impulse to withdraw, to protect herself. But then she looked around, the happy faces illuminated by the golden light of the Californian afternoon, the simple but delicious food prepared with local ingredients, the wine flowing generously from bottles with the Al-Mansour label, and realized she no longer wanted to run away. That evening, returning to the Mitchell estate, Emily and Tariq walked hand in hand along the dirt road, the sky tinged with the colors of sunset. There was a new intimacy between them, a silent comfort in each other's presence that didn't require constant reassurances or declarations. I was thinking, said Tariq, breaking a contemplative silence. Professor Martinez said the vines in your vineyard could yield their first limited harvest as early as next year. Not enough for commercial production, but sufficient for a few experimental bottles. Really? Emily's face lit up with enthusiasm. I didn't think it would be possible so soon. With the right care, vines can recover faster than you might imagine. He gave her a meaningful look. A bit like people. Emily smiled, recognizing the parallel. And what do you propose to do with this first limited harvest? I thought we could create a special edition. Very limited, perhaps only 100 bottles. Call it Rebirth or New Beginning. He hesitated. And use one of your works for the label. The idea struck her with the force of a revelation, the perfect union of her two passions, art and this land, in a project that honored the past while looking to the future. It's perfect, Tariq. Absolutely perfect. Arriving in front of the house, they stopped, neither seeming anxious to end the evening. The full moon's light bathed the landscape in a silver glow, transforming the vineyard into an undulating sea of blue and silver shadows. Stay, Emily suddenly said. Not tonight if you're not ready, but tomorrow and the day after and the one after that. She took a deep breath. I want to wake up with you by my side. I want to share my life with you, not just stolen moments. Tariq looked at her with amazement, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Emily, are you sure? She nodded, surprised by her own certainty. I've never wanted something so deeply. It's as if all these months, all these weeks of working together, of sharing, of healing, have been leading us to this moment. She took his face in her hands. I love you, Tariq. I always have. Even when I thought I hated you. His lips found hers in a kiss that contained a promise, a commitment more binding than any formal contract. When they separated, Tariq's smile was as radiant as the California sun. I love you too, Emily Mitchell. And there's nothing I desire more than to build a life with you, right here in this land we both love. Hand in hand, they entered the house that no longer seemed a mausoleum of painful memories, but a home ready for new laughter, new memories, new life. Like the small vineyard they were tending together, Their love was still young, still vulnerable, but rooted in fertile and promising ground, the ground of shared truth, forgiveness, patience, and hope. And as the moon continued its ascent in the night sky over Napa Valley, illuminating the land that had seen generations born and die before them, Emily felt a deep peace take root within her, a peace that came from the awareness that sometimes the most important journey isn't the one that takes us far away, but the one that brings us back home, to the land that formed us, to the people who love us, and finally, to ourselves. October brought with it a sweetness in the air, an attenuation of the brutal September heat, and the first signs of impending autumn. It was harvest time throughout Napa Valley, not in the small Mitchell vineyard still too young to produce, but in the vast plots of the Almansors and other surrounding estates. Tariq invited Emily to participate in the harvest at the family property, a festive occasion that brought together workers, friends, and family in a ritual as old as civilization itself. For Emily, it was a dive into childhood memories, the smell of freshly harvested grapes, hands stained with purple juice, the laughter and folk songs that accompanied the work, the outdoor lunch beneath century-old oak trees. But this time there was a fundamental difference. She was no longer a child observing from the margin, nor a stranger looking on with detachment. She was an integral part of the community, her hands in the earth and her heart open to the human connections she had avoided for so long. Karim al-Mansur, Tariq's father, was present at the harvest, an elderly but still vigorous man, with the same penetrating eyes as his son and a dignity that the years had only accentuated. When he saw Emily, his eyes lit up with surprise, and she believed she saw hope. "Emily Mitchell," he said, taking both her hands in his, "how much time has passed? You've become the image of your mother." "Mr. Al-Mansur," she replied, surprised by the warmth in his voice. "It's a pleasure to see you again. Tariq has told me about the vineyard, about the rare clone." He smiled, slightly shaking his head. Thomas would be so proud. He always maintained that small plot had something special. No one believed him at the time. "Not even you?" asked Emily, unable to contain the question. The elderly man sighed. "I'm afraid I was too focused on the big numbers, on industrial production. Thomas was a poet of the land. He saw things that I, with my businessman's mentality, couldn't comprehend." He paused, looking at her intensely. "Not a day goes by that I don't regret not having listened to him more. Perhaps if I had, things would have been different." Those sincere words touched Emily deeply. For the first time, she clearly saw that she wasn't the only one who had carried the weight of remorse and regret for all these years. Karim al-Mansur, too, behind his facade of self-assured patriarch, had his scars, his what-ifs, that tormented him in sleepless nights. "We cannot change the past, Mr. al-Mansur," she said gently. "But perhaps we can build something new from its ashes." The elderly man nodded, his eyes moist. "That's exactly what I hope, my dear. Exactly what I hope." During the harvest lunch, seated beside Tariq beneath a pergola of vines heavy with ripe grapes, Emily observed the large extended Al-Mansur family, not just blood relatives, but also workers who had served the estate for generations, friends, neighbors, all united by the common bond with the land and its traditions. "This is what I missed in New York," she confessed in a low voice to Tariq. "This sense of belonging, of continuity." He smiled at her, intertwining his fingers with hers under the table. "It can be yours again, if you want. This land, this community, this life." The unspoken offer in his words was clear, and for a moment Emily felt the familiar impulse to withdraw, to protect herself. But then she looked around, the happy faces illuminated by the golden light of the Californian afternoon, the simple but delicious food prepared with local ingredients, the wine flowing generously from bottles with the Al-Mansur label, and realized she no longer wanted to run away. That evening, returning to the Mitchell estate, Emily and Tariq walked hand in hand along the dirt road, the sky tinged with the colors of sunset. There was a new intimacy between them, a silent comfort in each other's presence that didn't require constant reassurances or declarations. "I was thinking," said Tariq, breaking a contemplative silence. "Professor Martinez said the vines in your vineyard could yield their first limited harvest as early as next year. Not enough for commercial production, but sufficient for a few experimental bottles. Really? Emily's face lit up with enthusiasm. I didn't think it would be possible so soon. With the right care, vines can recover faster than you might imagine. He gave her a meaningful look. A bit like people. Emily smiled, recognizing the parallel. And what do you propose to do with this first limited harvest? I thought we could create a special edition. Very limited, perhaps only 100 bottles. Call it Rebirth or New Beginning. He hesitated. And use one of your works for the label. The idea struck her with the force of a revelation. The perfect union of her two passions, art and this land, in a project that honored the past while looking to the future. It's perfect, Tariq. Absolutely perfect. Arriving in front of the house, they stopped, neither seeming anxious to end the evening. The full moon's light bathed the landscape in a silver glow, transforming the vineyard into an undulating sea of blue and silver shadows. Stay, Emily suddenly said. Not tonight if you're not ready, but tomorrow and the day after and the one after that. She took a deep breath. I want to wake up with you by my side. I want to share my life with you, not just stolen moments. Tariq looked at her with amazement, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Emily, are you sure? She nodded, surprised by her own certainty. I've never wanted something so deeply. It's as if all these months, all these weeks of working together, of sharing, of healing, have been leading us to this moment. She took his face in her hands. I love you, Tariq. I always have, even when I thought I hated you. His lips found hers in a kiss that contained a promise, a commitment more binding than any formal contract. When they separated, Tariq's smile was as radiant as the California sun. I love you too, Emily Mitchell. And there's nothing I desire more than to build a life with you, right here in this land we both love. Hand in hand, they entered the house that no longer seemed a mausoleum of painful memories, but a home ready for new laughter, new memories, new life. Like the small vineyard they were tending together, their love was still young, still vulnerable, but rooted in fertile and promising ground, the ground of shared truth, forgiveness, patience, and hope. And as the moon continued its ascent in the night sky over Napa Valley, illuminating the land that had seen generations born and die before them, Emily felt a deep peace take root within her. A peace that came from the awareness that, sometimes, the most important journey isn't the one that takes us far away, but the one that brings us back home, to the land that formed us, to the people who love us, and finally, to ourselves. Autumn progressed, tinting the Napa Valley hills gold and crimson. The small Mitchell vineyard had become a laboratory of hopes and innovations, with Professor Martinez visiting regularly, bringing university students to study the rare clone of Cabernet Sauvignon. Emily's life had assumed a new rhythm, a balance she would never have believed possible a year before. Tariq had moved into the estate, bringing with him not only his personal effects but also a new energy that seemed to awaken every corner of the old house. Rooms that had remained closed for years were opened, cleaned, filled with light and life. The study that had been her father's became a shared space where Emily painted and Tariq managed the administrative aspects of the Almansour property and their common project. The collective exhibition in San Francisco was rapidly approaching, and Emily spent much of her time perfecting the paintings she would exhibit. Beyond the landscapes and her father's portrait, she had created a series of works that captured moments of daily life in the vineyard. Hands working the earth, light filtering through vine leaves, the contrast between ancient viticulture techniques and modern tools. One mid-November morning, while adding the final details to one of her paintings, the phone rang. It was Attorney Wilson. Miss Mitchell, he said with a formal voice, I have important news. I found another document among your grandmother's papers, a sealed letter addressed to you with instructions to deliver it only upon completion of the 3-month stay at the estate. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. Can you bring it today? The attorney arrived in the afternoon, delivering a thick envelope of parchment paper sealed with red wax and the impression of Grandmother Eleanor's ring. Emily took it with trembling hands, feeling it surprisingly heavy. Would you like me to stay while you read it? Asked Wilson kindly. Emily shook her head. No, thank you. I prefer to read it in private. After the attorney left, Emily called Tariq, who was at the Almansour property, supervising the end of the harvest. I need you to be here, she said simply. When he arrived, he found Emily seated in the library, the envelope still sealed on the table in front of her. "You haven't opened it yet?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I was waiting for you," she replied. "Whatever it contains, I want to share it with you." Gently, she broke the seal and opened the envelope. Inside, she found several pages written in her grandmother's elegant handwriting, along with a small object wrapped in velvet cloth. Emily began to read aloud. "My dear Emily, if you are reading these words, it means you have chosen to stay, to face the past, instead of running from it. I cannot express how happy this makes me, even though I am no longer there to tell you in person. There is a story I never told you, a story concerning our family, the Almansors, and the small vineyard you are now tending with such love. This vineyard isn't simply a piece of land. It's a symbol, a bond that unites our families across generations, long before your father and Karim Al-Mansur became friends. In 1942, during the darkest days of World War II, when America was divided and fractured, my William, your grandfather, hid a family of Jewish refugees from Europe, the Cohens, in our cellar. It was an act that could have cost us our lives, but we weren't alone in this risk. Hassan al-Mansur, the grandfather of the current Tariq, provided food and medicine, also putting his family in danger. For 6 months, our families protected the Cohens until they could flee to Canada. Before leaving, Aaron Cohen, who had been a renowned vintner before being persecuted, gave us a gift, some cuttings of a rare variety of Cabernet Sauvignon that his family had cultivated for generations in a small vineyard near Bordeaux. The teardrop of the sun, he called it. Plant them, he said, and when they bear fruit, remember that even in the darkest times, life continues. Wine is patience, is hope, is faith in the future. William planted those cuttings in the small plot behind the house. Hassan al-Mansur advised him to keep them separate from the rest of the vineyards to preserve their purity. Thus was born the special vineyard you are now bringing back to life. In the years that followed, the two families remained bound by this shared secret, by this act of courage and humanity. The wine produced from those vines, just a few bottles each year, was shared between the Mitchell and Al-Mansur families during special occasions, a silent toast to courage and friendship. When our vineyards officially united in the 2000s, it seemed a destiny that was being fulfilled. And when everything collapsed, it was as if a curse had fallen upon us, breaking a sacred bond. But now you have the opportunity to rebuild, not just a company or a vineyard, but a connection that transcends business, that speaks of deeper values, courage, loyalty, hope for the future. In the package accompanying this letter, you will find the engagement ring that William gave me in 1946, when we could finally marry after the war. It is a piece of our history, a symbol of promises kept despite adversities. Now it is yours, to wear or to pass on to whomever you choose to love. Remember, my dear granddaughter, that the deepest roots are invisible to the eyes. They are intertwined in the soil of memory, of shared history, of love that persists even when all seems lost. The vineyard is your inheritance, not just as property, but as responsibility. Care for it. Make it flourish. And let its fruit remind you that even from the greatest tragedies, something precious and lasting can be born. With eternal love, Grandma Eleanor. Emily lowered the letter, her eyes full of tears. With trembling hands, she opened the small velvet package, revealing a delicate gold ring with a small ruby surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It's incredible," whispered Tariq, his voice husky with emotion. "My grandfather never spoke of this. Not even to my father." "War leaves scars that some people prefer not to reopen," replied Emily. "But look at what they left us. Not just rare vines, but an example of humanity in the most inhuman times." Tariq took her hand, examining the ring that now shone on her finger. "It seems made for you." "It's more than a jewel," said Emily, looking at the ruby catching the light of the setting sun. "It's a silent witness to everything our families have shared. Courage, loss, hope." Tariq nodded, his eyes shining with a new understanding. "And now we know why this vineyard was so special to your father. It wasn't just for the value of the wine, but for what it represented. A bond that transcends time," Emily completed, "a bond we are renewing." They went out together to the vineyard, now illuminated by the golden light of the autumn sunset. The vines, pruned and cared for attentively during the summer months, were beginning to prepare for winter rest. But beneath the surface, the roots continued to grow, to expand, to strengthen, invisible yet essential, just like the bonds that united their families across generations of joy and pain, triumphs and tragedies. "I always thought we were creating something new," said Tariq, embracing Emily as they contemplated their small kingdom. "But now I understand we're simply continuing something ancient, honoring a heritage that has been passed down to us." Emily leaned against him, feeling the weight of the ring on her finger. Not an oppressive weight, but a reassuring one, like an anchor connecting her to a story greater than herself. "I think this is the true meaning of home," she murmured. "Not just a place, but a continuity. A sense of belonging to something that existed before us and will continue after us." Tariq gently kissed her forehead. "And we are just temporary custodians, right? Like with the vines." "Exactly," smiled Emily. "Temporary custodians of something eternal." That night, as the light faded and the first stars appeared in the California sky, Emily and Tariq remained for a long time in the vineyard, talking of the future they would build together, a future rooted in the fertile soil of shared history, nourished by the finally revealed truth and protected by love that, like the most precious wine, had only grown richer and more complex with the passage of time. The morning of the exhibition in San Francisco brought with it a light autumn mist that enveloped the hills in an ethereal embrace. Emily awoke at dawn, a mixture of excitement and nervousness, making her heart beat faster. This day marked not only her official debut as an artist in California, but also the conclusion of a personal journey that had transformed her in ways she never would have imagined when she arrived at the estate 3 months earlier. Tariq found her on the terrace, wrapped in a heavy cardigan, with a cup of coffee in her hands and her gaze lost in the misty landscape. "Nervous?" he asked, joining her. "A little," admitted Emily. "Not for the exhibition itself, but for what it represents. It's as if I'm officially declaring that this is my life now, here in this land with you." Tariq smiled, intertwining his fingers with hers. The grandmother's ring gleamed in the pale dawn light. "And does that still frighten you?" Emily shook her head. "No, it surprises me perhaps, but it doesn't frighten me anymore." The art gallery in the heart of San Francisco was a historic building with high ceilings and large windows that allowed natural light to flood the exhibition spaces. Emily's paintings occupied an entire room, Californian landscapes, scenes of life in the vineyard, and at the center, her father's portrait among the vines. Beside it, she had placed a new work, completed only the week before, a painting representing 2 elderly hands clasping over a dark grape cluster, a silent tribute to the story she had just discovered, to the bond between the Mitchell and Almanzor families, to the shared sacrifices during dark times. The opening attracted a considerable crowd, art critics, collectors, specialized journalists, but also local vintners, Tariq's friends, even some of the workers from the Almanzor property, who had made a point of being present to support Miss Emily, as they had affectionately begun to call her. Karim Almanzor arrived accompanied by an elegant woman Emily had never met, Amina, his companion for some years, Tariq explained. "So your father would be immensely proud," the elderly man told her, observing Thomas Mitchell's portrait, "not just for your art, but for how you have honored his memory, for how you found the strength to forgive." "Forgiveness was a gift I gave first to myself," replied Emily with a gentle smile. "And now I understand that the legacy he left me wasn't a burden, but a privilege." As the evening progressed, Emily noticed an elderly man who was observing with particular intensity the painting of the 2 hands. There was something familiar about his profile, though she was certain she had never met him before. Tariq approached, following her gaze. "That's David Cohen," he explained in a low voice. "The son of Aaron Cohen, the man who gave the Cabernet Sauvignon cuttings to your grandfather. I invited him myself. He lives in Israel, but comes to America every year to visit the places of his childhood." Emily approached the elderly man with reverence. "Mr. Cohen, I'm Emily Mitchell." The man turned, his blue eyes bright despite his advanced age. "The granddaughter of William and Eleanor," he said with a slight accent. "It's an honor to finally meet you." "The honor is mine," replied Emily, feeling the weight of the history that united them. "Your family gave mine an invaluable gift." David Cohen smiled. "And your family gave mine the most precious gift of all, life." He indicated the painting of the hands. "This moves me deeply. It captures the essence of what my father believed, that even in the darkest moments, human beings can choose light, connection, hope. That night, after the last guest had left, Emily and Tariq walked hand in hand along the San Francisco Bay, the city lights reflecting in the dark waters. The exhibition had been a success, with several paintings already sold and future commissions assured. But more than the professional success, it was the sense of completeness, of circles closing that filled Emily with a quiet joy. "Do you know what I realized tonight?" she said, stopping to look at the stars above the Golden Gate Bridge. "That the true inheritance isn't the land or the vineyards or even the art. It's the capacity for connection, for love, for forgiveness." Tariq nodded, drawing her close. "And the capacity to begin again, even when it seems impossible. Like the vines," smiled Emily, "that each year after winter rest find the strength to bud anew. Exactly like the vines." They returned to the estate late at night, beneath a starry sky so brilliant it seemed unreal. The house was no longer a mausoleum of painful memories, but a warm nest, full of promises for the future. In the days that followed, they made an important decision. They would keep the two estates separate, the Almansors with their historic and prestigious production, the Mitchells with their small, specialized vineyard, but would create a common line, limited and exclusive. They called it Living Memory, with labels personally designed by Emily, visually telling the intertwined story of the two families. Professor Martinez, enthusiastic about the project, agreed to supervise the first experimental microvinification, planned for the following year. David Cohen promised to return for the first harvest, bringing stories and photographs of his family that would further enrich the web of connections Emily was rediscovering. The art school in New York offered her a flexible arrangement, teaching concentrated in the winter months, when the vineyard required less attention, allowing her to maintain both passions in her life. One evening in late November, with the first real cold penetrating to the bone, Emily and Tariq took refuge in the library before the lit fireplace. Outside, the first frosts had begun to prepare the earth for winter sleep, a necessary rest before the spring awakening. "I have something for you," said Tariq, offering her a small package. Emily opened it with curiosity, revealing a silver pendant in the shape of a vine leaf, with a date engraved, the day they met again at the station 3 months before. "It's beautiful," she whispered, as he gently fastened it around her neck, "to remind you that every end is a new beginning, that every loss contains the seed of something new." He took her hands, looking at her intensely. "I love you, Emily Mitchell. Not just for who you are now, but for the entire journey that brought you here, for every scar, every tear, every moment of strength you had to find to survive." Emily felt tears come to her eyes. Not tears of pain this time, but of gratitude, of fullness. "I love you too, Tariq, for your patience, your honesty, your courage in facing the past with me." They kissed gently, the warmth of the fire enveloping their bodies like a blessing. Later, lying beside him in the large bed of the master bedroom, Emily rethought the journey that had brought her back home, not just to the physical estate, but to an emotional home, to a sense of belonging that transcended places and time. She had left Napa Valley 10 years earlier, convinced that happiness lay in escape, in distance, in oblivion. She had returned reluctantly, with anger and resentment in her heart, determined to sell and leave as quickly as possible. And yet she had discovered that sometimes the true journey isn't the one that takes us far away, but the one that brings us back to our roots with new eyes, with an open heart, with the wisdom that only time and pain can bestow. Like the vines of the small vineyard they had tended together, her life had passed through different seasons, the blossoming of childhood, the frost of loss, the long winter of denial. And now, finally, a new spring was budding. Not perfect, not without challenges, but rich in possibilities, rooted in the fertile soil of shared truth and rediscovered love. Outside the window, the full moon illuminated the sleeping vineyard, promising that with spring new shoots would seek the sun, new vines would bear fruit. And like them, Emily and Tariq would continue to grow, to mature, to create something precious from the imperfect but sacred ground of their intertwined lives. "Sometimes," thought Emily as she drifted into sleep, "we need to lose everything to find what truly matters. Sometimes the longest road is the only one that can truly bring us home."